Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to blackusa.news. My name's Donnie Glover, and we're going to utilize our technology in a slightly different way this morning. Good morning, Jake Oliver. How are you?
I'm fine. How you doing, Donnie?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to hear your voice.
It's good to hear your voice. It's good to be with you.
Yes, sir. So, in terms of the COVID and the pandemic, how are you maintaining?
Doing pretty good. Had all my vaccinations. Had all three of them, and I feel fine. I mean, they have had no side effects, but I tried to avoid crowds. And when I do go out, I wear my qualifying mask, and it's just so many people have come down with it that I really want to be able to be a survivor on the other side of this, hopefully, when things warm up a little bit, so that we no longer have to be restricted to the level that we currently are. It's bad, very sad, but I'm fine. I'm doing okay.
Have you been following the COVID, how people are doing in other countries?
Yes. I've been listening to the broadcast, China and Australia and various countries in Europe. And they are, they're very dogmatic in connection with, you've got to wear your mask. You've got to be vaccinated. And to a certain extent, it is apparently having a positive impact. Although in some of those countries, like it's really scary how draconian their approach to forcing people to do what they individually may not necessarily be, interested in doing. But there's a lot of rational debate going on, I think, to try and convince American citizenry that it is important and is part of your citizenship to respect the public health initiative that is more important than just about everything. And if you have a part to play to ensure that your next door neighbor is going to be safe in avoiding this pernicious virus, then yes, you ought to put your own personal feelings about getting vaccinated and having a needle stuck in your arm to the side only for purposes of the public good. And that's what drives.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, where are we? What is the state of journalism today?
I think it's okay. The state of journalism is, they are trying to deal with the radical impact that the way people are rapidly changing the methods by which they are absorbing news has had on the historically traditional ways of reporting the news itself. And it's social media. Journalism is becoming even more important today, more so than ever before, because of people getting their news social media fashion, and without the normal journalistic discipline that has always ensured that what they are reading is in fact factually true and correct. You just don't know what you're getting now on social media, which is very sad, which highlights the importance of journalism, but it's also changing the entire journalistic environment.
How so?
People don't buy papers as much as they used to. They don't. Newspapers aren't being printed as much as they used to, because people get their news on the internet and through social media, and it's just, it's sad. It's also from advertising. Advertisers don't need print because they, all those major advertisers, they have their own websites that they can generate connections to potential markets.
But you knew this was coming, and you positioned the family's publication, the Afro-American Newspaper, to be at the forefront of this new digital world.
Yeah, I had a lot of help, but the fact of the matter is I felt as a result of my position, particularly as the head of the Black Press Association, and also as the head of the Maryland, D.C., Delaware Press Association, that I felt that the entire industry was in a very fluid position without really knowing what the direction ultimately is going to, where it's going to take us. And that fear drove me to more or less try to convince, persuade, and threaten people to, you got to do this. You've got to have a website. You've got to respect people's inclination to get their news on their phone instantly. And you've got to also respect the historical precepts of journalism to reflect whatever you do has got to basically have factual justification and accuracy so that we can maintain the respect of the readership in light of what people are now getting and could possibly evolve into getting as a result of the growth in social media.
I mean, who would have thought 30, 40 years ago that one person, not a journalist, could have as much influence as a newspaper? You know, you look at some of these celebrities with 1 million followers.
Yeah, that's true. TikTok and all this other. It's fascinating, but it's all being driven by technology. And technology back in the 80s was viewed as a 4-letter word almost.
Wow.
It was like they looked at it. They viewed me and folks like Ellis Marsalis and other folks that we were absolutely insane. But no, I mean it was interesting at the time that attracted our attention, and the more we started to more or less play with that, the more we realized the potential and the directions that it was going. It also, from my perspective, my time at just before I came to Baltimore in the 80s, I was a corporate counsel for General Electric Information Services Company, which was a computer company, big computer company out down in Gaithersburg. And it was like, they were being confronted with technological evolutionary changes that they didn't understand. But I was in a position to witness how they were respond to things such as desktop computers. Man, that shook up the entire distributed database industry, which what the General Electric Information Services Company was. It was a big computer company that sold time sharing to companies for purposes of those companies being able to buy a computer and begin to utilize this new computer age that was beginning to emerge. And it was, but it was very. The moment the IBM and the Apple peanut, the IBM peanut popped up, that entire central processing computer companies' reason to exist began to be viewed as questionable. Because people, instead of going to a large computer company and plugging in, they could buy their own computer and have that computer plugged in at home. And that was, and then when the phone started to evolve, it became even easier. But witnessing the evolutionary changes from the late 70s through the 80s and in the 90s, it really gave me a sense that technology was driving everything, and people are going to be far different in the way they respond. And when it came to newspapers, it was how they were going to absorb the news, and it was scary. It was fascinating, but it was also we felt that it was necessary in order to survive, and that to the extent that journalism, the precepts of accurate reporting was going to be at risk, it was even more important for us to begin to show the people that play with social media and have your friends tell what they think. But when you want the real accurate news, you need to go to an entity that you can trust as being factually providing you factual accuracy.
We are now on the metaverse, thanks to Dr. Tyrone Taborn. And I know the Afro is headed in the same direction. We're utilizing this Oculus goggles and virtual reality. This is the new world of journalism. That's why we needed you on this show, because you're like Captain Kirk.
I was a participant, but I never really viewed myself as the one who was the captain of the ship.
Yes, you told me to get a Twitter account. I was looking at you through the phone, but I trusted you and I did it, and I'm so glad I did.
Well, I'm glad you did also. I mean, those are early days, with Tyrone. We were having a lot of fun doing some interesting things. I haven't spoken to good old Tyrone in many years, but it was the things that he was beginning to do, and he was representing, and the things that we were beginning to do, and the people that we were beginning to connect with, who had similar interest in the evolutionary steps that were beginning to emerge in technology. It was indeed exciting times.
Mm-hmm. We've been joined by attorney Bob DeShields, and unbeknownst to me for many years, you are an attorney.
Yeah, I started out being an attorney.
How you doing, Mr. DeShields?
Good morning, Donna, and good morning, Jake. I told Donna I just wanted to come on and say hello to you, because I hadn't talked to you since before the pandemic, actually.
That's true. How you doing, Bob?
I'm great.
You sound good,
man. I'm absolutely great, and I even told Donnie about the discussions we had many years ago about how to better inform Black folk about what was going on at the Board of Estimates. But then we had to, at least I did, back away from it, because it looked like every week I was there protesting something, and I was concerned that the column might be construed as my own as a personal effort to benefit my clients, which wouldn't help credibility of the paper itself. So it never really got far. But nevertheless, I thought that the discussions that we had, were moving definitely in the way of addressing a need that was in the community. But I'm glad to talk to you, and I hope that all is going well for you.
Yeah, it's great hearing from you. It's great talking to you. All is well. I'm well. And
good.
Right now, Bob, given the environment of the entire world, that's probably all we can expect.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. It really is crazy out there.
One day at a time.
Well, one day at a time. But another thing is that the level of, maybe it's my age, because I'm 77 this year and going on 78, and it's the level of violence is really something that really is shocking. Literally is shocking, and I'm fearful for where all this is leading to in the safety of people, neighborhoods. I mean, we really, back in the day on Madison Avenue, we never had any problems like the types that I hear about almost daily. And I don't know.
You lived on Madison Avenue?
I grew up on Madison Avenue. Madison Avenue and Robert Street. I was right in the middle of the West Side Hood, and it was wonderful. You could walk anywhere. I'd walk to school, 112, on Lawrence and Calhoun in the morning. I mean, it was, everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, but you live right down the street from Perrin Mitchell.
Huh?
You were right down the street from Perrin's house, weren't you?
I was in the same block. I was about 8 houses north of PJ. My godmother, Lena K. Lee, lived directly across the street.
Okay. Okay.
And it was like, and Milton Allen was right up the street.
Yep.
It was a great little collective neighborhood that everybody, was very comfortable with. I mean, it was, but as a kid, you really couldn't do it wrong because everybody was watching you.
Right.
So if I came in one night late after 10 o'clock, my godmother would be on the phone to my mother and say, Jake last night came in about 10:30. You need to keep your eye on that boy. It was
and Jake. And Jake, the reason
East Baltimore was the same way. I know Lance Walker and the rest of the folks that we knew as I grew up and went to the city. That everybody they had the same focus, and it was the value system of the culture was intact.
Well, we were still a village back during those days, and the reason why I think, and I didn't grow up in Baltimore. I'm from I'm from a small town on the Eastern Shore called Salisbury. But the reason I think that the communities are less safe now is because people like you, guys like you, and kids like you were not encouraged to become, and did in fact, too many did not become members of the police force. I mean, because when grandma looks down the street and she sees somebody coming in a uniform and she knows that's Miss Mabel's boy. I remember him when he used to help me get my groceries in the store. Or that's Miss Susie's boy. That's Mr. John's son. Or that's, who that is. You know how we talk, Jakey. We don't have that kind of community anymore. And the fact of the matter is, as you know, communities stop crime, not the police. So if the community don't trust the police because they can't identify with the police officers, because they can't see themselves in the mirror, and they look like people that come from York, Pennsylvania, you're not going to have, and they're otherwise corrupt, as we read about on a daily basis, you're not going to have any community trust in police. And so therefore, even the good ones among them are going to be ineffective, because you can't tell the difference when they're walking down the street. You don't know whether it's a good guy or a bad guy. So you don't talk to any of them.
Well, let me tell you something else that's changed. They now are selling a product on the streets called fentanyl. And fentanyl is bringing addicts from everywhere to the Black community, where there was a time where a Caucasian drug addict would get pulled up on Pennsylvania Avenue as soon as they got out their car. Now, the young boys are talking about, respect that white boy. That's my customer. And I'm thinking to myself, when the white boys chase me out of Carroll Park, I'm coming out of Montgomery Ward. I look back, they got dogs, sticks. They say, get them. But now this young brother on Pennsylvania Avenue talking about, respect that white boy. That's my customer, and ready to die for it. That's where we've come. That's how far we've come.
What's the drugs? I think fentanyl is the latest. Well, it's not latest. It's been out there for a while. But again, back in the day, when we were a village, the only threat that we faced as kids at that time was the alcoholism. We had to cross Pennsylvania. When you talk about transaction on Pennsylvania Avenue, but back in the day, when we crossed on the way to school, the biggest risk was walking around with drunks who were coming out of the bars, on the street. The bars were closed at 2 a.m., but the drunks were still laying in the street because they were too drunk to move. but it was like, there were so many bars on Pennsylvania Avenue at that time, and it was like walking around bodies. It was like, New Orleans the day after Mardi Gras.
Wow.
It would smell, but it was safe because they didn't threaten. You just had to walk into the street to get around this man who was laying in the middle. Or, it smelled horrible, but it was safe.
So Jake, do you remember Violet Hill White?
Yes, Miss Hill, first black police officer that I was aware of. Yes.
Her name still puts fear in people's minds.
Oh, it makes me smile. It puts a smile on my face. She was a gracious lady, but she was also law and order, and could instill the respect of doing the right thing to a lot of us growing up. Because you see a lady who, is a black woman, like your mother, and but she had a blue uniform on. And I said, oops, you listened to her. Yeah, you followed what she told you to do.
Hey, Jake, tell me that Black Wall Street story. When I came to you telling you I was writing a book on Black Wall Street, you said, Donnie, that you told me that you had been to Oklahoma and that Tulsa was not the only story in Oklahoma. You said, you see, he done forgot more than I'm learning. He told me, Mr. Bob, that Oklahoma City was burned down before Tulsa.
Yeah.
We did an article. The article appeared in the front page of the Afro in I think it was 1918 or 1919, but it was about a place in about, I think it was Tulsa, but it could have been Oklahoma City. That was, it was Oklahoma City that was had been burnt down by a vigilante group of white citizens who were intimidated by the culture of successful businesses that had basically helped define the small black community in Oklahoma City. And they showed up, and the article appeared on the front page, the lower part of the front page of the Afro. And it was before Black Wall Street in Tulsa. And that article had been part of a blown up front page that had basically been plastered on as wallpaper onto the wall of the stair landing at the old Afro. And one day I stopped to look at it, and I said, wow, that's, that preceded Tulsa. And I said, that's amazing. And so what I did was I made a copy of it, because at the time I had been at an NPA conference in Tulsa. I sent it out there because there was a commission that was convened for purposes of paying the black community for the damage that it had suffered during the Tulsa riot. And I sent that article, that front page photo, to the commission. They sent a response saying that they had heard, but this is the only evidence that they've been able to get hold of, and they were profusely grateful in connection with the receipt of evidence that, yes, Tulsa was not the only one that suffered in Oklahoma during that period of time, but there was something that was 2-3 years before, and it was horrible.
Jake, as the publisher of the Afro, can you tell me how valuable your archives are?
They're extremely valuable because they represent a very important reflection of Afro history or black community history that too often the white community really never even either felt was important or ignored or just simply was not aware of. And because also, because of segregating communities that existed following the emancipation, white folks really never just keep your stuff to yourself and don't come over here. And it was up to the black press to report on what was going on. The big news, small news, the culture news, so that people could understand that, we were doing things that merited all of us being made aware of. And a lot of things that we could be very proud of. And a lot of people that we could be extremely proud of that otherwise would go unknown because of the absence of any recognition in the larger white press. And again, it really didn't begin to happen until the mid-50s that the rest of the white community began to focus on, well, what's going on in the black community. But the archives in black newspapers across the country are invaluable. Historical receptacles and reflection of how important our community has been to us. So somebody in a hostile environment that existed, particularly historically.
I couldn't agree more, Jakey. And I think that that a task for some students at Morgan or Coppin or any of the black schools to go back through those archives and construct and pick a period of time even and construct a history, an accurate history of the political history, political leadership within our community would be extremely, because we don't have that. That would be extremely beneficial because from unfortunately from time beginning we thought that the reason we weren't on quote Main Street was because of lack of resources. We weren't on Main Street because of what Mitch McDonald said last week. We weren't regarded as part owners of the country. We weren't citizens. No matter what, we weren't regarded as citizens, and unfortunately, everything that we did was evaluated through the prism of how much we contributed to a white-owned country, or a white business, or what we were measured. That was our measuring stick, rather than what it meant to us as a people, and without acknowledging that we paid for our citizenship a price that nobody else ever paid, and nobody else has paid to date. And that's why we owed a refund, because we overpaid, in my estimation. But nevertheless, that history from those archives would be critical to teaching our young men and women about ownership of this country. And so we wouldn't always grow up with a perspective of having to go ask somebody to give us something.
Sure. And Bob, the other aspect of that as well is the fact that a couple of days ago I saw a history piece on TV where someone asked the commentator why they were evaluating some movie, a movie theater in Hollywood, and they asked why it didn't involve more black folks and in significant roles. And the response was, at that time, they really didn't think that black folks had any intellect, that they were smart enough. And that's important. We have got to project the fact that we have always had the brains. We have always basically had the sensitivity to be able to do positive things and contribute, even though they did not want to recognize that. And it really blows my mind that you have people such as the governor of Florida who's trying his very best to ignore and eliminate the recognition that people, yes, white people have been very, very instrumental in limiting black involvement in ways which really are embarrassing today. But yes, your grandfather did do that, and it was accepted at that time, and we had to suffer that. And for people not to recognize that that was the case back then, and making sure that future generations recognize that happened, so that we don't repeat the same mistakes and the same attitudes that we had to suffer historically. Is so terribly important. We can't restrict the sharing of history, and we can't change history just because somebody feels that it may hurt somebody's feelings.
Well, I think it's more. I think it's much more than the fear of it hurting somebody's history. I think it's the fear of making history compensable. Up until now, it's been non-compensable. You know, what Lincoln did to, quote, free the slaves, righted the wrong as far as any compensation is concerned. Even though we never got anything, we didn't get the 40 acres of the mule or the homestead, 160 acres or any of that. But nevertheless, that took money off the table. So all that's left for you now is social acceptance into our world. Money is at the root of it. Compensation is at the root of it, because the compensation has to be tied to the citizenship, the ownership of the country, and that's what's missing. That linkage is missing. People interpret reparation and compensation as though, again, it's us asking for something as a gift as opposed to entitlement. That's our problem. That's what's missing in our community, and that's what's not being taught to our children. And it wasn't just Ron DeSantis in Florida. And unfortunately, I can't go there as long as he's still governor. But even I represent some of the NFL players in the CTE, and until recently, Black players were evaluated with a process called racial normalization. What that means is you don't get money because you didn't start off as smart as the white players. So in order to prove that you were hurt, you got to get back to zero, and then you got to prove that you were damaged beyond that. That was race normalization. That was just ended, so supposedly 2 weeks ago.
Jiggy, as we move forward, my big concern is our next generation of journalists. We've lost institutions. We've lost giants. Newspapers are not what they used to be. This is a whole new world of technology. How do we ensure that we have some credible journalists? I look at the work you did, for instance, grooming a Sean Yost, grooming a Donnie Glover, grooming countless others. How do we ensure this next generation of journalism? How do we do it?
We've got to get involved in the colleges. We've got to make sure that the journalists and students recognize not only the fact that the changes that they are already involved in as a result of the technologies that they're using, but also the importance of the concept of accurate journalism and how invaluable journalism is to the culture, to the Black community, and to the entire world. I mean, it really is absolutely. We've got to teach our kids at an early stage the importance of communicating through accurately, and to get them to be comfortable in writing, and as they become more comfortable in writing each other, they begin to develop the sense of accuracy that they can more or less be able to use to more or less refine what people are seeing.
Not to cut you off, Jakey, but it's bad. I talked to graduating college seniors who have not read Malcolm X's autobiography. I'm concerned. You look at Morgan's archives. How many of us actually take advantage of those archives? Records, books, transcripts you won't find anywhere else in the world.
They have got to be pointed to it. It's got to be publicized. They have got to be made to understand the value that they're going to miss and how their future is going to be impacted, and the future world that they're going to be a part of will possibly be used against them if, in fact, they don't understand what preceded them.
Spoken like a true champ. Mr. Bob, you got any more questions? We're gonna wrap this up. I didn't want to take too much of his time, but we're certainly glad to have him. And Dr. Tyrone Taborn is really proud to have him on the show, Mr. Bob.
Oh, sir, I'm happy to talk with my old friend, because I said to Jakey, you know, there's just not many old soldiers left. And COVID has taken its toll on us, but I'm glad that you're one of the ones that's still around, and venues such as this, mediums such as this, where we can communicate, are vital, unless we're going to lose another segment of our history, never to be recovered, because there ain't going to be anybody left that knows it and can tell it accurately. So I appreciate just the opportunity to have an exchange.
Same here, Bob. It's been great talking to you. It's been great hearing you. And you stay well, man. Keep on plugging, man, because we still need you.
Well, come on, Jake. Leave me with one of them famous, you know, quotes from all over the place. Come on, give me something good before you go.
I wish at my age, I can't recall as fast as I used to, Donnie. But again, I appreciate you extending the invitation for me to be part of this illustrious forum, that you have taken your time and invested your time, valuable time, to create, because I think it's important that the discussions that you are having are going to be essential for us to be able to maintain a positive existence moving into the future.
Well, thank you for helping to groom me. You never let me give you excuses. You always push the envelope. You encourage travel. You encourage us to get up out of our comfort zones. You encourage us that if we want to be the best, then you better go find the best wherever they are in the world.
That's true.
Thank you for your legacy, Mr. Jake Oliver.
Good morning. See you later.
Good deal. Well, folks, we'll be back later on at 10 o'clock with William Honolulu for Black USA News Morning Show. Marsha Jew said hello. Jake brought brought computers to the Afro.
With Marsha's help.
With Marsha's help. My name's Donnie Glover, and we'll see you at 10 o'clock. Have a good day. Good morning, world.